Well, hello. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Great. Well, thank you. Wow, it got quiet in here really fast. So, no, it's really great to see everybody here. So my job today is to officially welcome you to Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York. I'm Mike Ball, and I'm really proud to serve as the Vice President for Community Affairs here at Highmark. So if you don't know, so we've called Buffalo home for over 87 years, which is hard to believe. Through that time, we've strived really to be more than just a health plan by stepping in to meet our members where they are and address the community's emerging and greatest needs. Highmark has a long history of supporting behavioral health care through strong partnerships in the region's behavioral health care providers, including developing the first program in the region to reward providers for the quality care that they give to our members. Plus, Highmark has our own in-house behavioral health care team and a robust community giving strategy that prioritizes investments in partnerships and initiatives that support mental health in our community. Through Blue Fund, which is our health-focused grant program, we've invested more than $7 million over the last 5 years to support the community's mental health needs. This doesn't include our sponsorships and other long-term partnerships that support thousands of community organizations that are dedicated to improving mental health in the community. While Highmark has had a long focus on behavioral health, we've truly never as a community experienced the unimaginable number of tragedies that we have within the last calendar year. Through our support and interaction with our local mental health providers who are on the front lines through each of these tragedies, the increased need for mental health support for our community became even more apparent. Knowing we had to help our community heal and that it would take a lot of collaboration to have an impact, we reached out to our friends at Mental Health Advocates to identify ways and partners to help us achieve that. Without hesitation, all the organizations that you see on the boards and that you see here today just jumped on board. Working side by side over the past month with mental health advocates, Spectrum Health Buffalo Hope Program, Buffalo Urban League Buffalo Hope Program, Hope Rises, Horizon Health Services, Best Self Behavioral Health, and the New York State Office of Mental Health developed We Are Hope, a series of initiatives to bring mental health awareness, services, and support to our community. Melinda Dubois, Executive Director for Mental Health Advocates, will share more about this series, but first, I want to thank our partners for what they do day in, day out, and for all they've done to help bring this series to life. And most importantly, we want to thank all of you for joining us for today's event. Having a community discussion about mental health is such an important piece to achieving long-term healing and overall mental health for all who live in Buffalo and the surrounding neighborhoods. And this is just the start of what is to come in terms of support for our community from this amazing group of leaders. I hope that we'll find today's discussion worthwhile. So please join me in welcoming Melinda to the podium.
Hi, everybody. So again, my name is Melinda Dubois. I'm the Executive Director of the Mental Health Advocates of Western New York. MHA's mission is to promote mental health and well-being in our community and to support individuals and families who are living with mental illness. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss community trauma. As Mike said, We Are Hope is a collaboration of agencies who have started talking about ways we can provide hope. On Saturday, we had a day of hope and healing. Today, we are hosting a roundtable discussion, and we have compiled a resource guide located on MHA's website, mhawny.org, Many of you have seen these magnets that have QR codes. You can use those, bring them home, put them on your refrigerator, and you can access all sorts of mental health resources in our community. You can also find those resources in the room and also on our website. Our community has experienced an unprecedented number of traumas. The shooting on 5/14, the 2022 blizzard, the loss of Dr. Daniel and his children, 5 children tragically dying in a fire, Damar Hamlin's injuries, and most recently, the loss of one of our firefighters, a true hero. Oh, and we had an earthquake. Today, we are taking time to reflect on our collective trauma. What have we learned from these experiences? And what do we need? We have a distinguished panel of folks that have witnessed firsthand the trauma that our community has experienced, and we are asking them to start the conversation. At your seats, you will find an index card. Please consider adding to the discussion by writing down your experiences and your ideas about what the community needs. You can drop them off at the registration table on your way out. We would really like to collect your thoughts as well. You can also email us at wearehope@mhawny.org. Also, we'll be sending an email to all of our registered guests, and you can also submit your ideas and suggestions at that email. Today, Carl Shallahorn, MHA's Director of Youth Programs, will be facilitating the roundtable discussion. Carl?
Thank you, Melinda. So first of all, before we begin, I just have a couple of announcements. Any health information provided during this forum is for information resources only and not to be used or relied on for any diagnostic or treatment purposes. This information does not create any patient, physician, provider, counselor relationship and should not be used as a substitute for any professional diagnosis and treatment. Please consult with a healthcare provider and/or counselor for any specific medical or mental health needs. The sponsors and panelists expressly disclaim responsibility and should have no liability for any damages, loss, or liability whatsoever because of your reliance on the information contained in this program. But you all knew that already. Also, due to the sensitive nature of this conversation, I'd like to remind you that those who are with us here in person, as well as those viewing online, also just be aware of the topic of trauma itself. It can be triggering. And whether you're a provider or not, you want to ensure that you pay attention to your own needs. The Buffalo Urban League has provided community health workers, as well as Spectrum Health, who have behavioral health staff, who are here if you feel the need to check in with someone. We also encourage you to use the refreshments we have available as a means of physically grounding yourself. And if necessary, if you're viewing online, please understand you can also step away from the program if necessary to do the same. So I would like to briefly introduce our panelists who are going to acknowledge themselves when I mention their names. First of all, we have Cameron Burns, who is the Community Education and Outreach Coordinator for Crisis Services. Melissa Archer, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Buffalo Urban League. Robert Kanata, Senior Vice President of Business Development and Community Crisis Services at Spectrum Health. Patrick Green, Program Director at Horizon Health Services. Amanda Budwine, Director of Behavioral Health and Care Management for Jericho Road Community Health Center. Dr. Jennifer Lewis Johnson, Program Coordinator, Reimagine, I Am the Change, West New York Field Office of the New York State Office of Mental Health. Sylvia Lane, Director of Preventative Services, Say Yes to Education Buffalo. Mark O'Brien, Commissioner of Mental Health, Erie County Department of Mental Health. Kelly Dumas, Chief Operating Officer for Best Self Behavioral Health. And last but certainly not least, Vanette Folks, Coordinator of Community-Based Services at Endeavor Health. So I'd like to thank our panelists for being with us here today to share their expertise. So just to give an idea of what we're going to do now, I'm going to be posing a question to each of our panelists, and they're going to respond. And then after this initial phase of our program, we're going to have more of that roundtable we talked about, the idea of the conversation, trying to perhaps hopefully enlist some of your questions if there's any to be provided. So without any further ado, let's start with Amanda. So Amanda.
Yes.
Here. So as the Director of Behavioral Health at Jericho Road and a trauma expert, how have your clients experienced recent traumas, specifically the Blizzard and racist shooting? And as a trauma therapist, what do they need to do to prevent more trauma?
Yeah, I think that it is a spectrum. I don't think we can just do a broad brushstroke of how people are going to respond. I think it depends on their support systems. Do they have an elevated ACE score or childhood filled with trauma? What their community supports are, their family. And so when I look at that, I think of Dr. Daniel Siegel has this idea of the window of tolerance. And so we all have this window where we're able to be in our optimal zone, which just means our bodies are congruent. How we think, how we feel, how we act makes sense. It doesn't mean life is good. It just means we can make healthy decisions for ourselves and those around us. What we notice is that we get into the higher levels of that zone, which would be hyperarousal. So we've seen increased heart rate, migraines, tension, GERD, that's some physical symptoms. It's fight, flight. That's what we're used to it. And then what happens is if we tend to go to the tendency of hypoarousal, it's isolation, it's detachment, disassociation. So we saw a wide range of that. And we also saw it on the medical side because we work closely with doctors at Jericho Road. That's an integrated model. We can see what's happening to their physical symptoms and their mental health during these tragedies. As far as your second question goes, what we need to do, I think that, and I'm going to read this because I liked how I said it. It says that at our core, because of these elevated ACE scores and the lack of supports in community, we need to have a plan. We need to communicate that plan. And we need to acknowledge that that plan is imperfect. Because if we pretend that we have a perfect plan, what's going to happen is we're not validating our community members' experiences. And we're going to fall short. And we need to hold space for having a plan and validating their experiences at the same time.
Thank you, Amanda. Let's go to Sylvia next. So Sylvia at Say Yes, you're working with our youth in the schools. We know our children need safety and security. So during these community traumas, did you feel like our children were supported in the schools, and what were they missing?
Yes, so Buffalo Public Schools being one of our major partners with Say Yes Buffalo, they immediately consulted with us to do what we do best at Say Yes. We convene, we collaborate, we have relationships with a lot of the mental health clinics, some of those on the panel right now, to establish satellite mental health clinics in each school building. So we immediately reached out to our partners to make sure that mental health services were available for students in the Buffalo Public Schools. We worked with the crisis response team with Buffalo Public Schools to make sure that every admin principal at each school had access to our mental health providers to provide ongoing mental health supports, which we already were providing, but as well as to facilitate some of the healing circles within the buildings to make sure that families had access to mental health services. We were on the grounds as well with our partners at Johnny B. Wiley, coordinating mental health services for those who needed it during those times. So just, again, being a partner and to making sure that we convene and collaborate and make sure that those services are available for the community. What I would say would be missing, which is a problem that we all see, the lack of clinicians in the area. We know that there is a great need. We don't just have the capacity to meet all the needs, as well as making sure that we have mental health professionals of color to support our community for those, for the community that we serve. So we're continuing to work with our partners to make sure that we work with our colleges to make sure that we can make sure that those services are available not only for crisis interventions, but all the time, so we can be always working on those preventive strategies when, unfortunately, these events occur.
Thank you, Sylvia. Just as a reminder, you have the cards that are on your chairs. If you have a question or a comment, you can write it down, and we'll have someone collecting them for our conversation a little bit later. So, Pat, I want to hear from you as a trauma-informed care expert. So we all watch these traumas happen in our community on the news and on social media. So how can we support our community as trauma experts and as these events happening to prevent further trauma? Because, of course, they're repeated time and time again. What can we do?
So how do we help the community? It's a big question. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. And the answer that I would give you in a word is connection. Dr. Peter Levine, who founded a really effective trauma therapy called somatic experiencing, he has a quote on trauma that I often go to. He says that trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. And if we think about the legacy of trauma, traumatic events, they leave this lasting wound inside that can be with us for years and years. It manifests physically, emotionally, psychologically. And it's particularly difficult to put words to it. In fact, there's a lot of science that explains why that is. But the end result is that it's incredibly isolating. And you feel you're on an island alone and no one gets it. And this is where the connection can play a part. So I want to just bring it back to like what you can do individually. So, you know, the other compounding factor is the last 3 years we've had this incredibly disconnecting event, COVID, where we have been more disconnected as a society than ever before. So that compounds any type of effect on trauma. So what can you do right now, whether you're a community member or if you're in a helping field, is intentionally begin to connect with one another through compassion, the empathy, right? If we start doing that, right, that begins to create this community resilience. You might have noticed, like, with every community tragedy, we also see, like, the community coming together. It's incredible to see. Imagine for a moment if we maintain that type of connection all the time. What kind of resiliency, what kind of resourcefulness, what would that be like, right? This is what you can do right now as an individual to help your community when the next thing happens.
Thank you so much, Pat. I love that idea of empathy because I talk about that all the time and how we can try to promote it with the people in our lives and those around us. I want to go to Cameron next. So Cameron, at Crisis Services, you manage our local 988 and crisis hotline. So describe the calls you were getting during the Christmas blizzard in particular and how difficult it was to get the help that was needed. That was something that none of us has ever been through before. How did you do that?
Yeah, so, you know, as Erie County's 24-hour crisis center, we manage our 988 suicide prevention lifeline phone number for the Western New York region. You know, in addition to the blizzard, we are, as the crisis center, we're kind of hands-on, boots on the ground for a lot of these community events. So the blizzard, the Clarence Flight 3407 plane crash, the TOPS shooting, our CEO, Jessica Pirro, was on site helping to coordinate with my fellow agencies here. So as the crisis center, you know, we never close. All during the pandemic, we were open, we were taking calls, we were in person. But specifically around the Christmas blizzard and then also that blizzard in November as well, we were able to shift our hotline teams remote. So our hotline teams could safely be at home with their families as well, because we want to take care of the people that are taking care of everybody else as well. That's really important for our folks. So because we learned so much during 3 years of a global pandemic, we learned how to be able to shift remote very quickly. So, we're really proud that we were able to help keep our staff safe as well. Our lines never closed. We experienced no phone outages or anything like that. What was so unique about the blizzard is that when so many other places were having those connectivity issues, unable to answer the calls, we were still there. So, for example, folks that were calling 911 for issues and unable to get through to 911, or 911 was not able to come out to them, they were then calling crisis services. So a lot of what our hotline counselors did was kind of sit with folks on the phone. And certainly we're not medical professionals, but kind of help to use some grounding techniques, crisis response techniques to kind of talk people through, talk people down, work on calming techniques. And services like Department of Social Services, where people experiencing homelessness may go for help, was closed down. We were there to kind of talk with people on the phone about that crisis that they're experiencing of being unhoused during a traumatic blizzard. People who were short on food and the food pantries were closed, right? They're calling crisis services upset. And so those were the folks that we were talking to, and our counselors did a really amazing job kind of bearing witness, sitting through these moments with our callers, and just kind of helping them get through to that those next couple of days.
Thank you, Cameron. And of course, I have to also mention too, I'm sure many of you know, we went from 1-800-273-8255 or talk to 988, which is a much easier number to remember, but also perhaps increased the access and if anything, people remembering the number and increased calls. So the fact that you were able to handle all that during that time was really incredible, and I'm sure we'll continue to make that impact. So that's really great to hear. Melissa.
Thank you.
Melissa, so you're with the Buffalo Urban League, of course, New York Project Hope. So now Project Hope provides support for our community through a helpline and crisis counseling. And so Buffalo Hope was also on the front lines after the 5/14 massacre, as well as the blizzard. So in your opinion, what did our community members need the most during these traumas that have occurred over the past 14 months?
Okay, so when 5/14 occurred, it was called New York Project Hope, and now it is Buffalo Hope. And we all remember that day. And within hours, our team was on the ground. And we didn't know what to expect because this program was formulated because of COVID. New York Project Hope. So we were providing crisis counseling and resources, helpline, emotional support around COVID. And 5/14 happened, and we were able to provide very home, community, culturally based emotional support for people at a time that they needed it most, that we didn't even realize how much we even needed it as well. And at that time, people just needed to have a shoulder to cry on in the streets. We were boots on the ground, as we always are. And they needed a shoulder to cry on. They needed to feel safe. They needed to be held. They needed a tissue. They just needed us to be there as a compassionate presence and just quiet and silent there. Like you said, just being with them. And we can't say it's going to be okay. We couldn't say those words. It was just being there in that moment of silence with them and showing them that I am here as a human being to support you, no matter what your race are, no matter what. And, then it was, some time, then we feed them, Food is communal. When you eat together, it's healing. So feeding people, providing them those resources, because now they didn't have a place to go and not just buy food. That's where banking was done for some people. That's where community was found. It was a foundation for community. They met up with their friends there. And so just providing resources in any way that we could, that we always had done for COVID, but just being there as an ear, providing those resources. Then it became like food, then it's housing. Housing is still a huge issue. Then it's jobs. People were still suffering from what was going on with COVID. Now we were dealing with 5/14 and still not feeling safe, still not being able to sleep, still having cognitive behavioral reactions. And we just had to be there like, as a compassionate presence, letting them know they were not on an island, that everyone is feeling this collective trauma, and we are collectively trying to heal together. And then all the other traumas that we've experienced on top of that, you know, we were there for Dr. Daniel's funeral, because a lot of us were connected with them. We were there as a compassionate presence. We were there for the 5 babies' funerals that died from the fire. We were there. And the blizzard, even though we couldn't physically be there because we all were in our homes, the Facebook page that was created, the Blizzard 2022 Facebook page, we put our flyer up there and we did get calls. So once again, we were there just sitting on the phone, just cry, scream, whatever, we're here. You know, just giving that humanity to it. And then the moment that Buffalo opened up the, you know, where you could drive, we were out there foot soldiering, going door to door, compassionate presence, checking in, do you need anything? And we had collaborated with other organizations, because that's the strength, right, of getting things done. On an individual basis, doing that self-care, right? And self-care isn't just taking yourself to the doctor, which we need, but it's doing something that you can do for yourself for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever time you have that you like. Do it on an individual basis, doing that for your family, being compassionate and empathetic and listening, being aware, you know, taking a psychological first aid or mental health first aid or course so you can be aware when someone's in trouble, checking in on folks. And that's what you can do as a family, that's what you can do as a community. And then as organizations, doing what we're doing now, having a conversation, starting it has to start somewhere. And the collaborations and working together. And then getting out and voting, right? Getting out and voting to make sure that the people that are in office, they care about mental health, that they're making sure it's a priority. Because without your mental health, nothing else really matters. And so Buffalo Urban League, through Buffalo Hope, is still providing these services to our communities. Because even though there may not be a community tragedy right now, people are dealing with things on a one-on-one basis, and they're still suffering from all the different tragedies that we've had.
Thank you, Melissa. And I just have to say, I know your work quite well, and I've always appreciated how Buffalo Urban League, but previously, New York Project Hope was that presence that was needed for those basic needs, like you're saying, whether it be food or presence or even a shoulder to cry on, as they say. That's important because people oftentimes don't have anyone and are feeling isolated, even though they're surrounded. So that's really very valuable. So Bob Cannata. So Spectrum Health also has New York Project Hope, now called Buffalo Hope. So from a trauma-informed care lens, so what were some of the most pressing needs of our community that you've seen?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I think we're starting to see like emerging themes in all of this, and the things that we saw is Buffalo Hope, and we continue to see are things like safety is one of the big things. Access to services, access to food, all the basic needs, that kind of thing. And coping with fear, loss, coping with grief, coping with all the other things that have gone on for the past couple of years. I'd like to say starting with COVID, but we know like there have been issues in this community, you know, way before that. So if you think about those things, those are like the major things. And when I think of safety, physical safety, you know, where do I go to be safe? Who am I safe with? And then psychological safety, like who do I feel most comfortable talking with about how I'm really, you know, what I'm really thinking about? And then emotional safety, who can I really say or talk about with my most rawest emotions? So, you know, again, with our Buffalo Hope team that's operated along with Urban League over the past couple years with Project Hope, we've been providing that service. The 24-hour CARES program, crisis and restabilization emergency services that we do alongside with crisis services, we've done that, never closing. You know, maybe a glitch once or twice with our electronic. So that's, you know, when I think of it big picture-wise. And then, you know, when you look at it big picture, COVID comes, we're just starting, you know, my friend Christine talks about COVID exhaustion, and we're just tired of it. We're like, when is this going to end? And then fires and people getting killed in fires and blizzard and the earthquake, and then all we wanted to do one night was watch a football game, you know, to relax, to chill out a bit and say, okay, I'm going to take a break from this. And then Damar Hamlin gets injured, and like we snap back to, it's not supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to be life and death. So those are like the things that have kind of emerged. And again, what we like to do is think of it as, you know, think about it across the lifeline. There's specific needs to small children, adolescents, adults, and even the seniors, you know, reminding us, saying, you know, you all don't want us to, every time we try to get something, you say you don't want us to walk into a building, you want us to go online and get it. We don't want to go online, or we don't know how to do that. So everybody, you know, we all have like these different needs. So.
Thanks, Bob. And then you're absolutely true, or right about that. And when it comes to just those basic things like safety, that oftentimes are neglected in terms of just overall, you know, access and in terms of the service that are provided for folks that they may not be aware of how to access those things. So, Bennett, let's ask you about what Endeavor does in terms of providing mental care in the communities. So we know that these communities have been hardest hit by these traumas. I want to hear your perspective on trauma and community trauma. What did your clients need the most?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. From a community-based standpoint, I've been in the community, working in the field. What our clients and other people, when we was at 514 site, they need to see us, someone of our color. But a lot of times we didn't have the clinician with that experience to deal with the trauma. So I think going on like a team approach, as a case manager, I can go along with another clinician who have not of my culture, but you know, of my race. And if they see us together, you know, developing that trust, letting them know it's okay. It's okay for you to talk to. I had staff who felt they want to go but couldn't go because it was out there saying they didn't want to see quote unquote white people, right? So how do we do a team approach and bring us together to let them know, yes, someone did that, this person didn't do that, someone else did, but how do we help you in the process, right? And so another thing, you know, there was a lot of food out there to give away, but a lot of people didn't have access because they were scared to come out. They need a, you know, they need a sense of security. So I'm thinking, on one hand, you know, the news is announcing all this, but I'm afraid to go out to gather that bag of food. And then people come and knock on my door. I don't want to open my door because I don't know who is there. So if we have like a pre-communication, a blasting of something, letting people know, oh, someone is going to be at your door. Let them know, inform them ahead of time. Where do you get your medication? Can we go get that for you? You know, also for the blizzard. We live in Buffalo. We know snow coming. We just take it like nothing. I think one way of doing that to prepare, like especially for the medical fragile, they were not prepared. How do we get case managers or the doctor to help them prepare? If you have dialysis 3 days a week, you know you're not going to be able to get there because of the blizzard, you can't get out. Are we teaching them what they would need to do to help themselves while they were shut in? One of the things that tears me up was the mother who had to breathe into the tube to give the baby here. We need to prepare the mother to have something so when power go out, so that preparation, she didn't have anything to prepare. So if the power go out for any reason, not just a blizzard and you can't get anywhere, what do I do? So preparing them, equipping them with that stuff. For the 514, another thing for us as mental health counselors, case managers, we need helpers to help, we need help to help the helpers. After we finish talking with the people in the community, a lot of us, and I know staff still going through it, are still grieving over it because they had to step out because of their job to do this for someone else. But then now they have to go in their car and sit and cry or get home and cry. Where, we need something to say, okay, after you finish with your session, there's this place just for you to go talk to someone else who's not tied in the community. Maybe bringing someone from outside of the community who is not tied to it at that moment to speak to those helpers who are helping the other people. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa. I think that idea of preparing and educating and giving people the tools they need in those crisis moments is critical. But I really appreciate what you're saying about the care for the clinicians, providers, of course, many of whom are in this room right now. The whole idea of taking care of yourself so you can take care of others. And that's really vital because we know that many people who do this kind of work compassion fatigue, burnout happens. So we have to be able to equip people. So that's a really, really great suggestion. Kelly, so at Best Self, you were also on the front lines responding to the needs of the community after 5/14 and the blizzard. In fact, you continue to be involved in the mental health response through your involvement in the Resilience Center. From your perspective and from what you've learned, how can we be more responsive during community trauma?
Thank you, Carl, for the question. I think that one big thing we learned with the 5/14 and some of the following tragedies, but definitely with 5/14, is that race matters. And we don't like to talk about that, and we don't like to acknowledge that. But I think race definitely did not just start mattering at 5/14. It was just blaring in our faces where you couldn't ignore it, right? And so as a system, as a mental health system, as a provider, I think we also realized that we were not, as a system, as a whole, prepared to respond in a situation where race mattered above many other things. And so I think that we've talked about it. You know, one thing I think Melissa said, I remember, of course, we all remember that day, and I think as Best Self, we were able to respond in a way where we acknowledge, you know, when you say race matters, what does that mean for your, I guess, speaking to behavioral health and mental health partners? You know, it's like being able to not only have mental health professionals incorporated into your system who look like the communities that you serve, but also making sure that those folks who are not Black or brown are trained in culturally centered practices and understand what that means and how different marginalized communities may have some differences, and how do we meet people where they're at so that they can, I guess, embark on a path of healing, because there are many paths to healing. We have this very rigid, especially in the mental health system, healing and recovery and treatment, it must look like this, and that's not true for everyone. So I think we still have some work to do. There are groups that are really respond well to more connection, community, so how do we acknowledge that within our system? I still get requests today. We're still providing services and responding to specialized requests, but one of the first questions I'm always asked is, are these going to be licensed clinicians? It's like, okay, yes, we have licensed clinicians, and that is not always what, it's like we're still valuing and not allowing space and acknowledging that that is not always what's most important. Some people just want to get together. They need a supportive, protective environment where they can connect with others, where they can be seen and heard. A very basic human need is to be seen and heard. Sawubona, that's what that means. And so how do we, as a community, as mental health providers, how do we ensure that we're offering that we're acknowledging the value of that we're not devaluing that, and that we are not placing other things above what's important to people's healing process?
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that response. That was, and you talk about using all the resources that are out there. Of course, not just the traditional, as you call it, the medical model. There are faith-based, peer-based, other types of approaches, holistic approaches that are coming to the forefront, but I think are at many times just as valuable as adjuncts to traditional treatment. That's kind of what you're saying there. That's great. Let's go to Dr. Johnson. So tell us about this new OMH initiative. Oh, by the way, Dr. Johnson is new to Buffalo. I just have to say that. So welcome to Buffalo. Tell us about the new OMH initiative, Reimagine and the Change Emergency Response Grants. Tell us about that.
Thank you, Carl, for that welcome and the wonderful question. Good evening or good afternoon, everyone. Reimagine I Am the Change. Some of you may be familiar with it as titled Surge. It was rechristened a couple of weeks after I got here to Reimagine I Am the Change. And the Western New York Field Office of Mental Health has the distinct privilege of administrating this innovative fund under the auspices of SAMHSA. So what this grant has brought to the east side of Buffalo, specifically zip codes 14208, 14209, and 14211, is and has created innovative, non-traditional mental health wellness services. Cycle 1 of this grant ended on January the 31st, and the Office of Mental Health has the distinct privilege of having awarded 5 recipients that will be providing boots on the ground services. You should see some amazing things in the Challenger and in the community rolling out in April. Some of the caliber of innovative, creative agents of change types of services that you will be seeing that this grant is going to bring to the community in the umbrella of hope, resiliency, imagine, reimagine, collective, community healing, all of the things that my distinguished colleagues have mentioned. There will be programs from the Academy. You will have programs from Pappy Jazz Martin Collective. You will have programs specifically identified as arts that heal for seniors. You will have a people of color faith collaboration, and there will be amazing programs from local artists bringing creative and expressive and very unique artwork to the east side of Buffalo. Cycle 2 of this grant ends on Friday, April the 28th at 5 o'clock Central Standard Time. Carl did give me permission to put a plug in. I will be hosting one final information session. I had the privilege of hosting 3 of those in the community this month. They've been amazing, have pictures to show. This final information session will be held at Hopewell Baptist Church at 1301 Fillmore, I don't know if it's Streeter Avenue in Buffalo, New York, at 5 o'clock p.m. sharp. I believe there may be copies of the RFP out on the host table and probably a flyer that speaks to the community information session. The main takeaway, not only am I honored and deeply privileged to sit in this seat to work under this amazing director, Mr. Chris Marcello, who heads up the Western New York field office, to bring such caliber and needed professional services to the community. I am just, in our Texas vernacular, goo-goo for gaga, because it is just amazing. And I'm hoping that you as a community will come out when you see these wonderful programs advertised in your Challenger and support these wonderful men and women who are getting ready to be magnificent agents of change because they reimagined that they are the change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. We also can't forget the criterion. But that's really great that
You want me to keep talking?
No. I would say it's another paper. It's another paper, the criterion. But you're new, so you get some. Yes.
My director probably doesn't want you all to know how many days I've been here, how many pairs of boots I bought, how many coats. But anyway, back to the task at hand. Please check out the RFP. You have 28 days to write a creative, innovative, gap-filling proposal. And we honor the work of everyone that will submit. And we're privileged to read what you'd like to bring to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. This is amazing to think that our state and our state Office of Mental Health is behind a program like this, a project like this. It's really going to make a difference. Of course, they always saying, put your money where your mouth is, right? I think this is an example of that, and of course, Dr. Johnson, with your leadership and your direction, I think it's going to do that. So, Mark, you get the final initial question. So, just talk about your perspective from what you've seen, from really the community hurting and hearing from this wider lens that you see. What do you think the needs are in terms of responding to the community-wide trauma that we've had?
Well, thank you, Carl. First of all, I want to thank everybody for showing up today. This makes a statement in and of itself, and I want to thank my colleagues and friends up on the platform with me. You are truly amazing people. I want to welcome Dr. Johnson to our area. The test will be when you come down to 198, you can pronounce Skijaquada. And also, it's blue cheese, not ranch, with chicken wings. So that's okay. You know, if I was to do a poll of everybody around here and ask anybody, is there anybody sorry to see 2022 fade into the history books? Is there a person who would want to repeat last year, right? And we've had 3 years of COVID, and we've said, and somebody said, we're done with COVID, but COVID's not done with us. And the same thing can be said about 2022. We're done with 2022, but it's not done with us. And so there was a lot of lessons, I thought, both personally and as a system. You know, I'm going to talk about the blizzard in a minute. And, you know, how many were here during the blizzard of 77? Right? Right? And so, as bad as that was, this was worse. And whether you call that an act of nature, an act of God, we look at 514, and that was neither. It was a hatred-fueled race crime. And I think back to a moment I will not forget as I was leaving my grandson's Little League game, and the county executive called me, and he told me there was a mass shooting at Tops about a half an hour ago, and we need to get a team on the ground. And I just said to him, "You're kidding." Not using that word. And he wasn't. And as a lifelong Buffalo resident, I never, ever would have thought that that type of hatred would have been visited here. And I had hoped we would have escaped it, but we didn't. So I can remember coming down the Skijaquada, and if anybody's been around long enough, you know it used to be 50 miles an hour, right? Now it's 30 miles an hour. I was doing 80. And I pulled up next to a cop, Buffalo Police. His window was down. I rolled down my window, just showed him my badge, and I said, "I'm going to the shooting." He said, "Go." And I took off, and I did 80 miles an hour to the shooting. And on my way there, because Buffalo is the biggest small town around, right? It really is. It's kind of like they say about the United States and England. We're two people separated by one common language. And we know each other in Buffalo. And I got on the call, and I started calling the CEOs and COOs of agencies who were my friends and colleagues before I ever became the commissioner. And I said, "This is what happened. I need your people on the ground with me at Tops." And they were there. And some of those people are on this, Kelly, Melissa, Bob's folks, crisis services folks. And we pulled together as a team. They didn't care what agency you were from. They didn't care what title you were from. But they came back and said, "How do we help?" And it was a day of just getting out there and getting in among the people and saying, "How can we help?" And it was spoken very well about what you said about trusted messengers, which was so important, but we didn't have that. And we had to pull that together. And that day stood into overnight, and we had the deputy county executive bring in pizza. And one of these things, I said, have you folks eaten? Because we talk about mental health, but we talk about we have to feed our bodies, we have to feed our spirits, and we have to feed our soul. And I can remember one person sitting there, and you know what I'm talking about. She was sitting there waiting with her brother to hear news on her stepfather. And there was 2 people who had not been identified, and they were both male. And she knew and we knew she was not going to get good news. I kept stopping in and saying, are you okay? She goes, okay. Are you okay? No, I'm okay. Have you eaten? She said, no, I'm good. I said, come on, we're going to go eat. And there was Lenova pizza there, and it was just that. And we stayed with her, and she found out about 11:30 at night, the news that she was expecting. So by the next day, we had opened up the Johnny B. Wiley. And the partners around the table are amazing. I will never forgive them. And I ran into the same person who had a mask on. And now I had a mask on. I didn't the night before. She looked at me. I looked at her. I said, what do you need? And she said, just a hug. And sobbed on my shoulders. And she took a piece of me with her that day, but I took a piece of her. And so we think about what trauma means to all of us. And we're Buffalo. We're a hardy group. We have endured blizzards. You know, we've endured endless winters. You know, they say Buffalo's 2 seasons, winter and mud. It's true. We've endured the heartbreak of the Bills and the Sabres. But we are a community. We are a community that's both together and yet separated. Because this is a community, and go to the churches and see how integrated the churches are. And we've got a long way to go. And we have much to do. So as I look around the room, I'm amazed and awestruck by the resiliency that people have shown and the willingness to help, even if they didn't know how. Because if you work in human services or you work in mental health, and my friends up here will tell you that, it's 20% art, it's 20% science, and 90% relationship. Now stay with the math on that for a second. So we have to look at what's the work we have to do. And we do have a lot of work to do. But we're going to do it together. And we look at it from an individual and from a system. There are things that we can learn from, because the difficulties on, whether you want to call it East Side or East Buffalo or whatever you want to call it, the disparities, the inequities, they did not start last May. They did not start last May. And there's not a good thing to be said about May 14th. But if we don't let the lessons learn, and if we don't let the inequities be addressed, then we've failed the people who have been hurt by 514. Because we are better than that, in my belief. And I think people would share that. And then we come together around the blizzards. And one of the things I found is prayers and thoughts are not enough. Action at the policy level, at the societal level. And also information. Information is power. Because not only did it last year expose the gaps in services, it exposed the gaps in knowledge. Because there are a lot of things out there that we have services around that people just don't know about. And they don't know how to access and know how to get out. And awareness is access. And access is power. And that's where the healing starts. And as we look at healing, the good Lord gave us 2 of these and 1 of these, right? And that's what people are looking for, an ear, a shoulder, someone to care, someone to understand, someone to hear. You don't have to always have the right words. You have to be able to sit with somebody with their pain and try to understand and try to know that somebody cares, because that's half the battle. So are there lessons to learn? Absolutely. Some of the lessons we want to think of is, A, rethinking what it means to provide mental health services. We talked about trusted messengers and counselors and therapists and professionals who look like the people they serve. Absolutely. Paraprofessionals, peers, the power that they can bring as well. People need to know how to access. Taking services out of the clinic and into the communities. Going very non-traditional. And then working with our state and federal partners to have the funding to back these types of things for resources, because these are all important. So there's a number of things we want to know, and one of the things I just really want to close is, as we bear through these traumas of the last year, know that we can't look at in the rearview mirror, because it could happen again. And one of the things we have to do is learn from those lessons. God forbid a shooting should happen again, but it just happened the other day in another community. A blizzard, we know, is going to happen again, right? So I would say that when we talk about people and their mental health, the one thing I would say, when you look at health, is 3 things that are really important: purpose, hope, and connection. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So before we get into the round table discussion, just remember you have cards that you have available. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to write it on the card, and I think we have maybe some folks in the back, maybe Amy or Chrissy can help collect them if you just hold it up if you have something, and then they'll do that. So that would be appreciated, and they'll just bring them up to me. So I want to start with a question, and maybe Melissa, you can kick us off with this one. And then I think we'll just kind of do a little popcorn, so to speak, with this. And we'll start off. So basically, I want to just touch on this idea of disparities. Kind of heard some of the things that have been discussed so far in our community. So both the 514 massacre and also the blizzard we talked about, they had its epicenter in the city, and it revealed a lot of those in our Black community have lacked essential resources such as access to food and even emergency services. So while these things may not seem to be related to mental health for some, how can you explain these disparities add to the trauma this community experiences, and what are some things we could do to address these disparities? Melissa.
Well, when you think about equity, everything affects health equity. I mentioned voting before, making sure the right people are in office that reflect the values and take not just your mental health, but physical health, all health issues for all people are addressed. Housing, if you don't have proper housing, safe housing, that's going to affect your health and your physical health. And if I'm stressed out about it, it's going to affect your mental health as well. Food equity, job equity, everything affects our mental health. At the end of the day, you could be at the, blood pressure could be perfect, blood sugar could be perfect, but if mentally I'm stressed or I'm hearing voices or I need help, I know I need help, and it's so stigmatized to get help, especially for Black and brown communities, and I don't seek that help, everything else stops. Your mental health is like gas to a car. If there is no gas in that car, it is not going to function properly or not going to function at all. So our mental health is crucial, and the disparities just adds to it. Because if I cannot get a proper job or a proper education, how am I going to get proper housing, health care? How am I going to make sure my children are taken care of? How am I going to make sure they're in a proper school district or a proper school where they're getting what they need? So everything affects our mental health, and that's how I would love our individuals and communities and organizations and politicians to really start thinking. The core of it is it's mental health, and everything affects it. And your human psyche is only but so strong. I know you have different schemas out there, and especially in the Black community, the strong Black woman schema, and all these things that we have to deal with all these different things. And it's like at some point, if we don't check in, we will check out. So those disparities, the solutions, number one is it's multi-pronged. We have to get educated. We have to get active. You have to be an advocate. And voting is huge. And you have to reach out. There's nothing wrong with reaching out to, different organizations or your faith base or, whomever you connect with to get the things that you need. But we won't know, like you said, access is power, right? Knowledge is power. We have to get out here and get the education, get the access, and get the knowledge of what is out here. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Go ahead, Pat.
So, how many new supermarkets have been constructed on the east side since May? One, right? One. How many were there prior to May 14th? One, right? The reason why I'm pointing that out is making the connection between disparity and the impact of trauma. That I went back and read an article about the TOPS reopening and the response of the community and how people were not ready and faced with this incredible choice of, do I go shopping for food or do I get re-traumatized? Right? That's what disparity does. Right? And our systems, and this is just biology, our systems operate with a couple of models. And this is particularly important for trauma. Our system will operate with this motto of never again and better safe than sorry. So you have a system right now that is constantly monitoring threat, right now. And it's checking in with everybody. And so everybody's systems are all talking to each other. For the purpose of protection. And so that is activated when you go into an environment where there's a trauma has happened, like a shooting, right? It's not about logic. It's not about reason. You can't tell it not to. It's going to do it anyways. And this community is constantly faced with that reality. And that's what disparity can do to a community. Like if you're feeling something right now, that's good. That's good, right? Let that feeling now turn into action. What can we do about it?
Would anybody else care to respond?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the disparities in the food desert that existed on the east side has existed for many, many, many years. And folks of in that community have spoken up about it many, many, many times over the years. Just nobody was listening. And to read national articles in the news and national news coverage talking about a food desert on the east side of Buffalo and the spotlight that got, I'm hopeful that can bring that change. But yeah, there was a lot of discussion around, is it too early for Tops to open? Is it too early? And it's like, well, then what? What do folks living in the community do? Because to your point, it wasn't just grocery shopping. It was check cashing. It was community. It was things like that. Like, you're getting your paycheck, where do you cash it? And then the disparity that causes. So people have been saying it. People have been shouting it from the rooftops. Just the community hasn't listened. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that this wasn't just brought about by the 514 shooting.
Go ahead, Bob.
Carol, I just want to add to, we think about disparities, and it's easy to say, yes, yes, we all have to work at that. And then people kind of go into like their own little silos on what that means. And, I guess I say it's kind of like what other people are saying, in that we have to be able to communicate better. We have to be able to take risks with each other better. Real risks to expose what really goes on with us and the way we think about things. I can come here and say, boy, that blizzard was really, really tough. And, here's all the ways that affected me. But my experience is going to be so different than somebody else's who had a street, unlike mine. I mean, mine was plowed, but somebody who lived on a street where it wasn't plowed, and somebody, again, unlike me, that couldn't go to my neighbor's if I was hungry. I always know I can go to my mother's house, and she's got lots of food. I always know I can go to my neighbor's house. But when you really look at the big picture, you have neighborhoods where people can't knock on each other's doors and say, hey, can you help me out? Because they're saying, I can't even help myself out. So I really think we just have to have more of those conversations. There's that old saying, it says, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And I think it's like we got to keep remembering that when we have these conversations with each other. Otherwise, I'll be real quick about this. With resiliency, we're a real resilient community. People agree to that, but there's another side to that. Resiliency means snapping back. And we got to be careful that we don't just look at it as, oh, good, we snap back to who we were. We got to keep moving forward, because snapping back, that's not going to cut it. We have to make some major changes.
Let's get one more response. Thank you. One more response, then we'll move on.
Yes. What I want to say in regards to that, we only see one grocery store, but we also see a lack of stuff for our youth. Our youth need somewhere to go. We have the Johnny B. Wiley Stadium, right? At 514, months after it was going, nothing happening now. Why the city and the east side don't have organized things for the children to do after school? Why our community centers are not open for after school? Why our schools are not open for them to go to, stuff for them to do? When I work in the community doing wraparound, about 10 years ago, there was quite a few things I could take our children to. Now, there's rarely anything. We had respite. Our parents need respite. They work all day, they work weekend long hours, they live paycheck to paycheck, and they have to come home, and the kids are just sitting at home playing video games, playing Fortnite, doing mindless things. Why? They have nothing to go to into the community where they're going to feel safe. We need organized stuff. You know how many track scholarship or tennis scholarship all these other outside communities are doing for their kids? My son got to go to on a Saturday for 3 hours, just drop him off at a community center where they just hang out. That was 3 hours of respite for me. Right? The city doesn't have that access. We need to come together and work together and support each other. I call a couple of my other parents, hey, do you know there is this middle school night? You want to drop the kids off? Let's carpool. We need to do that more in the city and get our kids into organized, safe activities for them to do. And we need to start building that here right now.
Thank you, Vanette. That is, I think, of course, we always say, the youth are the future, and that is a prime example of how we develop relationship and understanding and, like Bob said, move forward. And this actually ties into one of the questions that came from the audience that I want to touch on. And it's from Truletta Williams, founder of the Save Our Youth Foundation. And so she has several questions here, but the one I want to ask is, how can organizations like hers help get connected and reassure families that mental health matters? Because, of course, with youth, there's also families, and families are, as you said, important. So how do we get this message through to them and reinforce this fact? Anybody want to tackle that one?
I think it starts with supporting parents. Because a child's first, until they go to school, the first everything that they get is from either their parents or their guardians, whoever the guardians allow around them. And now we have, screens, right? That's how they get their source of information. And if we support the parents and give them the tools, not just give them the tools, but teach them how to use the tools. When you have to use different tools, especially when they get to teenage years, and building that language about mental health. Oh, we have to go get our well visit. We have to go get our dental visit. Oh, we're going to go to our counselor. Just make it a very organic, a very real conversation. But we have to pour into parents for that, because people only do what they know and they can't do what they don't know. So if we're not having those conversations, which I'm so happy we're doing that here, but it has to happen in more than just this space. It has to happen in the churches. It has to happen in the schools. It has to happen in the doctor's offices. It has to happen at home, and just very organic. And that will help with the destigmatization. So then if I'm hearing voices, or if I'm struggling, I'm having anxiety attacks, I won't think it's taboo to go and talk to a counselor, to reach out to someone. Or even if you are reaching out to a faith-based, your pastor, them taking that extra level and referring you, and you being able and feeling confident to go and reach out to that person. But I think it's everything, individuals make families. Families make communities, and communities make society. If the individuals are not healthy, the base is not healthy, the society won't be healthy. I have a tree in my backyard that was not healthy. The leaves were always had little moldy things on them. So we tested the soil, and something was wrong with the soil. It starts from the base. And we have to, we're the adults. We have to start the conversations for ourselves, pouring into ourselves, and then for the next generation. Because what really pains me is all the trauma and everything that we have gone through. As adults, we're dealing with that. With our program and so many other programs, we deal with a lot of children. They don't even have the words to process what they're feeling. So just teaching them what they're feeling. When you're mad, your heart races and you might get sweaty, and and putting a word to it, and not making it a taboo again that they're feeling that. That's okay to feel that, but how are we processing it? How are we coping with it? Giving them positive coping strategies. So it starts with the families. It really does, in my opinion. It starts with pouring into these parents, and then people that aren't parents are preventive. Start pouring into them. You got a lot of people out here that don't have babies, pouring into them before they have these children. And understanding, I've got 2 daughters, and I'm always saying, don't have babies you can't afford. And they're like, oh, I got money in the bank. I'm like, no. I mean mentally and emotionally. You got to do the work. So we just have to pour into each other, pour into families, pour into these parents that are tired. These single parents especially, they are tired of being tired. I'm tired of being tired for them, right? They're tired, they're exhausted, and they're on their last leg. And like somebody said down there, that dropping them off at the community center, yeah, that's time for you, right? I used to teach court-mandated parenting classes, and I would say, those little kids, those 5-year-olds should be in bed by 7 or 8 o'clock. And then that's time for you. A little self-care for you in 1 or 2 hours. And you get laundry done, all these different things. But they don't know this. Like I said, and I'll say it again, people only do what they know, and they can't do what they don't know. So we have to pour into them. That's it.
Thank you, Melissa. That was a lot, very powerful response, and all I can say is I wholeheartedly agree. So I want to ask another question from our audience. So it says, Sylvia, Bennett, Kelly, and Mark all mentioned the importance of utilizing non-traditional services to assist individuals in the community So, and I think this perhaps might be for you, Dr. Johnson, even though you are still new. What is OMH, or even Mark, the Department of Mental Health, doing to ensure that these services, such as peer services and our community service and supports, can be adequately paid for, since they are most currently unbillable? Ooh, I don't know if we want to.
Wow, that is loaded, and I'm going to lean in to my illustrious leader, and I'm going to have someone to pass him the mic, because I do not want to dishonor that question. That is a profound question, and it definitely warrants a level of expertise and knowledge that I don't possess because I'm too new to the zip code. Mr. Chris, may I pass you the mic, please?
And before Chris, too, I can speak to that, too.
Okay.
Because Chris is thank you, with OMH, Mark. I must say, our state and local government partners have really come to the table and have shown up and have acknowledged and shown up in a space of questioning and opening and understanding, okay, there's something different, and so how do we fund these practices? So out of 514, we pulled together, because we needed culturally centered response, which AKA meant we needed our Black mental health professionals there, which is who we brought anyways. But OMH formally has provided funding to keep that team in place. So we had pulled together some of our mental health professionals, but this team is funded through OMH now, and they're allowed to go in and offer spaces in the community that are healing, that you can't bill for, because that's the thing with the mental health system. A lot of it, there's certain services you can bill for. Building connection and relationship takes time. And so for people to even embark on a healing process that might involve a billable service, they need that space to connect, to come together, and for some, that's very healing and therapeutic. So we can do music and art, we can do writing. This team is able to go into the churches, they can do I don't like to use the word non-traditional, because these are traditional in some groups. It's indigenous. So this has allowed us to bring these services to the community, and we don't bill for it. So I do know now it's not enough, but it's being funded, and I fully expect that it will continue, and there will be more funding poured into that area. So it's happening, and I can speak firsthand to it. So we're doing it. So thank you all for providing it. And before OMH, the county was paying for it. So I didn't want, that's why I'm like, Mark them. So they have come in and acknowledged, and they have provided funding for us to be able to do that work. And
Thank you, Mr. Chris and Mr. Mark as well, because when the New York Project Hope ended in December, ended because FEMA, it was a federal grant. FEMA decided COVID was no longer in crisis mode. The Office of Mental Health reached out, and they are funding our program to continue as Buffalo Hope. And some of the crisis counselors now, community mental health workers, are here, and they are paraprofessionals, thoroughly trained, though, through SAMHSA, OMH, and FEMA for crisis counseling and continuing education. But that is exactly what we have been doing for about 2.5 years. We have been going into the schools, into the senior centers, I mean, wherever. We've been on the streets with, people that are homeless. We've been everywhere. They never say no. And they have been providing that emotional support. We have a helpline. People walk in and get emotional support or counseling. And in addition, they do the paint and sips. They do the whatever the community wants, they get from us to help with heal. We get their input. And the hallmark of our team, that I can say when 514 happened, because we were already in the community, we had already had 7 different cultures, languages, and LGBTQ, all that represented. They trusted us. They trusted the Urban League. We were already out there doing the work. So it was an easy transition. Like we got the message, right, a long time ago. And so I just want to say thank you all for continuing this program, for the much needed work, because it's still needed, and still a lot to be done, but we are so appreciative that you had the foresight and just the acumen to actually look ahead and say, we need to keep this program going. So I want to
Wonderful.
thank you for that.
Thank you. As I yield Mr. Carl to Chris to address that very specific question, that component that Kelly spoke about under the auspices of this grant is called the Black Mental Health Response Team, am I correct? So it is very specific, very unique, and again, so excited that this is a component of this Reimagine I Am the Change grant. Chris, please.
Come on up.
No, thank you very much. And, representing OMH, first of all, I'm very proud that our Commissioner, Ann Sullivan, of course, Governor Hochul, we're listening. Bureaucracies move slowly, and it really is the efforts of everyone here and everyone out there that finally are like, you know what? This might work. And it's through your advocacy, and it's through all the good work that you're doing that, I think of, Kelly, your discussion about it doesn't take a licensed mental health counselor to provide everything. No, it takes community, it takes listening, it takes indigenous services, it takes all of that. And we're, I think I'm happy to be a small part of that change. And in terms, I think the question was specific to peers, and we're finally in a space now that many of our peer services are billable, which, even 5 years ago it wasn't even a twinkle in a payer's eye. It was, so now we're in that space, and it's really through all of your advocacy. It's not as if, we were suddenly inspired here. It really is through your advocacy, and I have to say, we are talking in a beautiful space of a payer, and, so thank you, Mike, who I met first when our boys were 3 years old at North Park at the playground. And it really is, taking your advocacy, the advocacy of our payers who understand too. So long story short, keep that advocacy up, keep asking those questions and asking those questions and asking those questions and asking those questions. And we're finally starting to hear, and really it's all through your hard work that we're here and we're going to get farther. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I just have to say, on a personal note, as someone who supervises a team of youth peers, they thank you for that recruitment and retention bonus. Just saying, it's real. So I do want to take actually one more audience question, and then I have kind of a.
Carl, can I add one thing
please.
onto what Chris said? First of all, I have to echo everything Chris just said, and Chris is downplaying his role here, which is what he does all the time. But it really was the state office. The county executive was a very strong proponent of the work that was being done, especially at the beginning. But the county's resources were not what the state was, and OMH really advocated not only to the state but to SAMHSA, the feds, and got a federal grant to come in. And one of the beautiful things it did was it took the help without bringing in the red tape. And it said, they said the golden rule is do unto others as you would have done unto you. The platinum rule is do unto others as they would have done unto them. And so what this allowed was, for example, Dr. Johnson to be here to help start coordinate this, but all the work that everybody around this table has been doing, and very, I agree with the non-traditional, because in some ways it's very traditional, these indigenous work. So, and the other quick thing, if I can share, quick anecdote, and it's very quick, because Kelly was there, is as we listen to each other, is to begin to have conversations and be able to ask hard questions and question what we know and what we're not. And as we were sitting at the Johnny B. Wiley with Dina Thompson and all folks planning stuff out, and she'll remember this, and then we talked about the messengers, the trusted messengers, and somebody mentioned the term white allies. I said, okay, I know what that means. And then somebody else said, white accomplices. and I didn't know what that meant. And I accomplish meant one thing to me, and I reached out to somebody. I said, what does that mean? And in that case, and I was one of, there was like about 10 people in the room. I was one of 2 people not of color in the room. It's a very unique place to be, and I've been in that place before. And they told me what that meant. And that white ally, and tell me if I've got this right, that white ally is that person that shows up at the public events and the cameras are on. The white accomplice is that person that stands arm in arm with you through the time, through the hard work. And I think that's one of the things that we have to continue to do, is to say we are one people with different cultures, but not just to respect that diversity, but to celebrate it, honor it, and learn from it. So, again, I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I want to ask Amanda, so this was another audience question about the future, as far as how do we support our community when it comes to facing re-traumatization. Of course, that is certainly sort of one of the things we talked about. So how do we support our community in the coming months from, as we heard, just getting over 2022? I'm not over it. I don't know about anybody else. So how do we do that?
Appreciate the easy question. So future. So if we think of the future, right, and I know hope is later in the program, but it's having long-term goals and short-term goals. It's not bypassing someone's experience to make ourselves feel better. So what does that look like? So short-term goals, I think, is this. I think it's shared presence. I really enjoyed Pat's remarks on Peter Levine. Like, we as humans are created to take an external stimuli into our nervous systems. It's not our brain that gets it first, it's our nervous system. That's why we see medical symptoms the way that we do. So how do we have shared presence where my nervous system is speaking with your nervous system? And the thing is, we get knocked all around with this trauma happening. So short term, how can we have shared presence so we can co-regulate, so we can help each other through this just by being present? And how hard is that for us, especially during such hard times? Long-term goals, and it's been really a breath of fresh air to hear everything that's being done non-traditionally. Weird thing about me, I like sound bowls, and I also like West African drumming that I do with some people from Ghana. And when I do that, I'm realizing how healing, it's bilateral stimulation. We see this, it's scientifically proven. And so I think long-term goals is to have these, I'm selfish, so drumming circles because I enjoy it, or like yoga or meditation, or just even being at the barber and teaching people there to how to heal. And it's connection, it's community. And so I think the long-term goal, we have to realize sometimes we overthink what we can accomplish in a year, and we underestimate what we can accomplish in 5. So we have to hold on to that this is going to be a steady cadence that we have to keep moving forward to in non-traditional ways. But they're very indigenous. They're very a part of nature and who we were designed and created to be. We've just gotten so far away from that point, and it's time to start moving back towards that.
And real quick, to that point, this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
Right? We're in this for the long term. Pat, you want to say something?
So I want to give you a phrase. So I'm going to break it down to the individual again. And here's the phrase: permission to be human. Right? How can we heal from pain that we don't allow ourselves to feel in the first place? Right? So there's pain already. And so if there's a new trauma, guess what happens? It just builds on top of that existing pain. And it makes it even more difficult. So what can you do now is this idea of just giving yourself permission to be in struggle. You're a human being, right? And whatever you're feeling is right. It's okay. It's appropriate. It's reasonable. It's understandable, right? And if we start there, then there's a place to go. I can't tell you how many times as a professional when I begin working with a new patient, how much we spend just on that aspect of this idea of just being permission to be in struggle before we even begin any type of treatment. And so that is a place that you can begin right now, today, this moment, to give yourself permission to be a human being.
I love that. That's always good to be reminded of. Thanks, Pat. Maybe one more response, and then we'll continue. Anybody else have anything to add to how to respond to the future? Go ahead.
I'd just like to say, trauma lives in our bones. The trauma that our grandfathers and grandmothers and great-grandfathers and great-grandmothers experienced can carry through to us. So that's why this healing is so important. I watched a documentary called Aftershock on Hulu about Black maternal health and Black women that died in childbirth, and they're so much more likely to die in childbirth than white women. And then the effect that has on those babies that then live through their life knowing that their mothers died in childbirth. And it's just all about the trauma lives in our bones, and we carry that. So by confronting that trauma in these healing spaces and things like that, we are not only improving our lives, but the lives of our children and our children's children and their children, and just continuing that growth for the future. And, it's not just about us, it's about everybody that comes after us as well.
Thanks, Cameron. That's a really great point, even talking about historical trauma and things that have led to kind of where we are and going forward. That's a great point. So we have time for maybe just a general kind of last comment, question, and then maybe a final remark. So the topic is We Are Hope. Okay, We Are Hope. So anybody want to just share what maybe gives you hope?
I would say just continue conversations with the community as we're making plans for the community to address the community needs. It's important to include them so they can let you know what they need. I think that's important. We can make every plan we need, but you need to include the community in what do they need and what would be helpful for them. I have a mixed feelings about the word resilient. It's always you're resilient and you're, but letting people know. We talked to the discussion earlier about giving people the permission to be vulnerable, and you don't have to be resilient all the time. It's okay, and if we start to break some of those stigmas down, that's when people will seek assistance. So just keeping the community in mind, letting them know that it's safe spaces, that you don't have to be resilient. That's not a good word all the time, So just having them understand that is giving me hope, and we can continue to have these conversations to keep that in the forefront.
Thank you, Sylvia.
I think what gives me hope is the continued conversation. So often, I think we are ready to move to what's next and move on and put things behind us. We want to fix things, address things, and move forward. And this is a big problem that, again, there are issues, there are systemic issues, there are things that have been in existence for years and years and years. And so we have a lot of work to do to undo some things. And so what gives me hope is that we are still talking about some of it. I'm hopeful that we will continue to see progress towards more actions and defining what that looks like, what we need, because, I'm in the mental health realm. I hear a lot of the talk in terms of mental health and what's needed, but it's so much bigger than that. And so, as it was mentioned, there's so many other things that impact people's mental well-being. All these systems have to be addressing the inequities and the changes that are needed. And I struggle too when I say, because we say systems, and I think it removes it, like it's like we are people run systems. So, it's like people have to actually come to the table and be willing to acknowledge that change is needed. And so where do we start, and how do we start undoing some of these things? When I go to the doctor, when I go to the hospital, which I hate to go to the hospital, it takes a lot for me to go. I don't like to go there because I don't like how I'm treated. I already know when I walk in the door, I'm judged And so and it's in the back, and it's not just in my head. You know, I've gone and, you know, I have to explain why if I'm in pain and I'm not drug seeking, I'm actually a counselor, I don't do, you know, but to have to go through all that, it's frustrating. So what is it about this system where I feel like as a person, I can't come get my needs met, it keeps me away. And you have these things in so many different systems, the education system. Why is it that we don't have more licensed folks or folks who are approved and licensed to provide? What is that about? So I think we have to start challenging and disrupting these systems that perpetuate the inequities that also then impact our mental wellness. So I'm hopeful that we are talking, but I'm hopeful that we're going to see more different people at the table, more questioning of it, more willingness to, we need to do something different. Let's start defining what that is and let's start doing it.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Go ahead, Bob.
So raise your hand if you showed up today. That's a trick question. Like, everybody should be raising their hand, right? Right? But that's what gives me hope. People showing up, right? You all showed up, right? That gives me hope. Everybody here has a passion, and this matters. That gives me hope.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
I think Bob and then maybe Vanette.
Yes,
Or
for
okay.
me, what would give me hope is that we go back into the community and reassess what family needs. You know, at the beginning, we check, you need this, you need that. We need a 3-month check, a 6-month check. You know, reassess, linking them to resources. I think for every client that going to see a clinician should have a peer and a case manager. Because you come in to address your mental health, but you can't do nothing for me if you can't find me housing that I need tonight. I need somewhere to go sleep or for my food for my kids. And if the clinician don't have someone to reach out to say, hey, Vanette, I have this client. Can you help them navigate the system? I need someone to call 211 because they have another client coming in 5 minutes. So they don't have that time. What happened to that client? You know, for example, a client was dropped off at our clubhouse, you know, for after hours from 4 to 9. We opened that endeavor for clubhouse. This person was homeless. So we had to jump in, call 211, get a bed, and set them up in a Uber Health to get them to the next destination. You know, that transportation, they have housing transportation, but that doesn't start till 7. I can't just have her sitting here. We have to figure it out. And so we need more people like us working together, communicating, getting the resources out to people in the community. I think there's a lot of resources out there that the community is not aware of. Funding is coming all over. But you wait for the last minute, you get that flyer, oh, that's going to be over there for that program, and the weatherization program. A lot of people don't know about that, that people could use that for the blizzard. Where were those stuff given out? After the fact. Oh, yeah, you could have done this, you could have done that. So that preparation, help them prepare for stuff. They need housing, they need mattresses, they need food, ongoing stuff, not just go over here. The food pantries are limited. They don't have the resources. And so that's what everyone needs, a case manager and a peer, mental health, substance use peer, to help them navigate the system. And we need that money continue to come in so we can continue to provide that, because we all know housing is the biggest deal that's going on right now. We need people not to be charging people harming the leg for a 1-bedroom. That's not appropriate. Roaches running all over, you're not, you know, that kind of stuff. How can I put a parent with a child there say, oh, yeah, here's a room? But they have to take it because they have nowhere else to go. So we need suitable housing that doesn't cost $1,000 for 1 bedroom.
Thanks. Bob, I'll go to Bob and then Melissa. Go ahead, Bob.
I just want to add, I've been around a long time, and I'm only 27 years old. And I can truly say, from the bottom of my heart, I say that we've never had this like level of collaboration between the agencies that are involved in all my years. I've been around like 40 some odd years, and we've all, you know, played together, so to speak, and we've all had, you know, our friends or our favored, you know, other entities. But never before has it been where you really sit down, you talk about differences, and you really try to take the risks that you need. So I'm very thankful for that. I have a lot of hope. The other thing, and I know we don't have a lot of time for this, but I keep thinking about what are the general things that we could be doing different, in our community. There's people in our community that are saying, I really want to help out. I don't have any money. I'll tell you what, I can give $2 towards this. Can you take my $2? And we want to find a way to say, yes, we can use that. We can help them. I have some food. I have other things. And I think as a community, we have to find better ways of doing it. When you see that in a blizzard, you hear the story about the person that knocked on 10 doors and finally gave up and did something else, and just kind of, went off on his own, took everybody into school. I'm saying to myself, wouldn't it be great if we could do something as a community? And again, I haven't thought this out, but can we do something like where you could put like a certain colored light or something in your window that says, I'm safe, or you could come here, you could knock on my door, and I've got maybe some food or a shovel or shelter, versus like people that would say, I'd love to help out, but I'm elderly or I'm very vulnerable. You can't come to my door. And then the reverse of that is there like, I don't know, this is just me, but is there like a community distress flag that people could put outside their house? I don't know, a yellow flag that when you're walking by or you're driving by, you say, yeah, that means they want me to go up there. And then you happen to notice when you go up that their walk isn't shoveled, that there's this much snow in front of their door. So then the brain says, why don't I start there? Let me shovel a path to the door, then knock on it. So I keep thinking there's a whole lot of those kind of cool things that we lose sometimes when we look at more of the big picture in the organizations.
Great, thanks, Bob. Melissa?
Okay. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I am hopeful that we are all going to be a change agent, not just for ourselves, but for the next human being sitting next to us. Okay? We're going to look the devil, or we're going to look isms. We're going to look at disinvestments. We're going to look at anything that is a barrier to our advancement as a human being and say no more. If you're angry, if you're unsettled by what the current state of our mental health, of our everything right now, use that to empower yourself to act. Advocate. Get educated. Advocate. Get out here. Do something. Even if it's something and we can give $2 to it. But we have got to feel empowered. And that's one of the tenets of the Buffalo Urban League, is empowering communities. That is so powerful to me. But get impassioned, right? I'm hopeful that this conversation and several conversations, hopefully, that we'll have down the line, and so many other things that are going on, good things going on in the community, will empower people to get out here and do something. Because there's no more hiding. The Band-Aid is off. There's no more hiding behind the isms. There's no more hiding behind the things that have put certain communities where we are at today. No more. And we need to say enough is enough and move forward. So that's what I'm hopeful for, that these conversations will light a fire under everyone to move. Because if we don't get it together, and get it together now, and now is the time. You've got funders, you've got governments, everybody's on board now because so much has happened. There's no more hiding. And we have to take this time. We have to make this move, because if not, our children and our children's children, they are not going to make it.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Excuse me, several things give me hope, but I think to sum it all up, one of my truths to power is that, and I think it has resonated here on this platform, is one, you cannot change what you do not confront. So there have been multitudes of things that have been expressed that need to change and need to be confronted. But probably the credo that's closest to me is, when it is in your power and ability to do good, then you need to do it. And sitting in this seat of administration of this grant gives me the ability and the power to do good. And this grant also creates a stream of hope from collective thoughts of many, many persons that have been at the table. And here are a few summations. This grant has created hope for persons to be heard and to be seen. I don't know how many times I heard that over and over. I see you, I hear you, you hear me, and I see you. This grant has created expression, it has created truth, it has created safety, it has created equity, investment, relationship, trust, opportunities. It has created value, and it has also allowed individuals to really show their craftsmanship. I believe in being true to your craft. Whatever you say you're going to do, be a master at it. I love talking, teaching, stirring, illuminating, igniting. I'm true to my craft. And as I said on a side note in this interview at the end of last year, if I wouldn't have applied for the position if I didn't know and have a strong sense that there was something I could bring to the table thousands of miles away. Something to bring to the table. It's in my power and my ability to do good, and that is what I strive to do at a level of excellence. So it gives me hope to be a part of this non-Starbucks coffee conversation.
Well, Dr.
Thank
Hess, I want to thank you for being at the table. So maybe one more hopeful comment before we do final remarks. Anybody? Amanda, how about you? Any hope?
These easy questions when you throw them at me. So as far as hope for me, I really find it at work. I don't know if you guys know much about Jericho Road Community Health Center, but it is as diverse can be. And I've been there for 7 years. And one thing that we did after May 14th was we do devotionals every other week. It's optional. And Dr. Glick called our first in-person meeting since the pandemic. And it was at 1021. And we had everybody. It was a U-shaped, okay? And I can see, it looked like the United Nations. And it wasn't segregated by religion or by creed or by culture. None of that it wasn't like that. And what we had is we had a multi-faith devotional. It wasn't, we are Christian in our mission and at heart, but it included Muslim faith, Jewish faith, Christian faith. And then we go in a circle. This is super corny. We go in a circle and we hold hands and we prayed. And I think what gives me hope is that we can go across religious lines. We can go across color and creed, and we're human. There's that connection. And, Jericho Road is based off a story in the Bible thousands of years ago. And if it's not a sacred text, that's still pretty incredible that it affected something today in Buffalo. So that's what gives me hope is my work family. So.
Thank you. Well, thank you. That's a wonderful way to kind of wrap up the comments about hope. So we have time for final remarks, and we're going to limit this to 1 minute. So let's go with Sylvia. So Sylvia, any closing remarks?
I know they say you shouldn't come into a room and you learn something from everybody, and I really enjoyed being on the panel with my colleagues and listening to everyone, and I really enjoyed and learned something from everyone's comment. So if I can take anything from today, I'm grateful for that.
That's wonderful. It's always good to learn from our peers, right? Patrick.
Wow, lots of great energy in this room right now. I can feel it. So I want to take my 1 minute and give you some homework. So here's the challenge. In the next 24 hours, find one person and connect with them with kindness. You don't have to know them. You could. That's great. But just one person. And this builds momentum. Action is contagious. And that's what I would leave it with. And thank you so much for showing up.
Thank you, Pat. Cameron.
I wanted to thank everybody for coming here. Buffalo's had a rough 14 months. There's been a lot. It's when we named it all at the beginning, it's like, oh my gosh, right? So to me, safety and hope are the most important things right now. Continuing to reach out for safety and hope is of the utmost importance. And if you continue reaching out, one of us here is going to answer that call. So just continue calling for safety and hope.
Thank you, Cameron. Melissa.
1 minute, right? I want to say thank you for honoring us to be here and to be the experts, as they say, and sharing our expertise. But you are the expert on you, and you are the expert on your family and your community. And I want you to take that back and feel empowered and act. And number 2, self-care. I always have to do a plug for self-care. My favorite thing for self-care is eating ice cream and watching Golden Girls. When the pressure gets really high, I just need 15 minutes of Dorothy, and I'm like, I'm good. So really look at what self-care you need to just lower the temperature every day so you can be the best version of yourself. You are the expert on you, your family, and your community.
If anybody knows me, mine is music.
Ooh.
So that's my self-care. Let's go with Bob.
1 minute. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. It sounds like the Academy Award. I lost five seconds. Okay. No, I really want to say, speaking for myself and Spectrum Health, it's our 50-year anniversary this year, and we've been around 50 years. We hope to be, together another 50 years. What I love about it is that we're going to continue to make this commitment to be part of the cutting edge of doing all these things we need to do in our community. And just a quick plug, and this fits with what Melissa said earlier. This funding that we have been able to do from Project Hope, then transferred over to Buffalo Hope, allows us to really do the non-traditional stuff. And I'm kind of proud, the other people in the agency look at me sometimes, but I'm kind of proud to say our Buffalo Hope staff are not trained in our EHR. They don't know how to use our treatment records. They're not thinking about billing, Medicaid billing, how long we saw somebody, what we can do. So when they say to me things like, let's have tea with Mr. Peterson, or let's do some yoga, let's do some dance class, I'm going to say, yep, that's great, because they can do all that non-traditional stuff. So I love that part. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Let's go with Annette.
Yes. For me, I lead my team in a way as like a team approach. So, they always say there's no I in team. What team is for me is together everyone achieve more. So I think what I would like to see is all of us continue this. That's everyone on this panel, because I think we working together can get better results.
Wonderful. I love that. Working together. Well, that's another theme. Yeah, another theme we've had today is working together. Collaboration is important. Kelly.
Thank you. Check. Okay, it's on. Thank you. So then thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to hope that once we leave here, everyone in this room continues to do what we can do our parts and normalizing taking care of our mental health. It is important, and the way we do that is by continuing to talk about it, acknowledging that we all have mental health wellness that we should be tending to, just like our physical health, talking to our loved ones, our families about it, making it a normal conversation to have. Just like you have a primary care, you should have an identified way where you are doing preventive things for your mental wellness, not just reacting when you feel like, So I think if we can all do that, we will get closer to destigmatizing what gets in the way of people actually being able to embark on mental wellness. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Dr. Johnson.
Well, thank you, Carl, for excellent moderation, and thank you, Melinda, for this gracious opportunity. I think the biggest takeaway and closing remarks are, for me, it is just such a privilege and an honor to have met some wonderful people, to have an opportunity to collaborate and get to know and become better acquainted with some wonderful people that are doing some amazing things in the community. And I'm just honored to be at this table, at this space, at this time for this assignment at this season in my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Amanda.
I have a lot of deep reverence for the work that you guys are doing in your communities and the work being done within you guys. And I just want to take the next 30 seconds and just be silent because we've talked about sharing that today and just recognizing what we're going through. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Amanda. He's waiting. Mark, last remarks.
Thanks, Carl, Melinda, for hosting. I want to thank you all for, as has been said, showing up and truly showing up. I want to thank my dear friends and colleagues at this table. You know, if it's been said that courage is not the absence of fear, then emotional health is not the absence of pain. Pain is what makes us human. It's learning to live with it. I'm still a trauma therapist, and one of the best quotes I came across that I was not smart enough to make up myself, that I give to people who have been hurt, is healing doesn't mean the damage never occurred. It means it no longer controls my life. So I would implore you all that as we head out of here, don't forget to live, don't forget to love, and most importantly, don't forget to laugh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So this has been a very important conversation we've had today. And I don't know about any of you, but I've certainly got a lot out of it. I really want to just once again thank all our panelists. Can we get a round of applause? Just want to extend thanks to Amanda Budwine, Sylvia Lane, Pat Green, Cameron Burns, Melissa Archer, Bob Canada, Kelly Dumas, Dr. Jennifer Lewis Johnson, and of course, Mark O'Brien. I also want to thank the organizations that helped to bring this all together: Buffalo Urban League, Buffalo Hope, Spectrum Human Services, otherwise known as Spectrum Health, their Buffalo Hope program, Hope Rises, Horizon Health Services, Best Self Behavioral Health, and Mental Health Advocates of Western New York. And finally, I'd like to also thank our program sponsor, Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, Western New York, for their support as well. So I'm Carl Schallhorn. I just want to remind you that when we work together collectively, great things can happen. So thank you. Let's keep hope alive. Thanks for being here.